Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to the Ephrata Community Church weekly podcast, a conversation with our pastors and leaders meant to continue encouraging you to know God, know freedom, know purpose, and make a difference.
Hey Ephrata Community Church, great to be with you. Happy New Year. Hope it was wonderful. Kevin, good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
We wrapped up the year. I want to talk about a few things if we could. One, I want to chat a little bit about as we wrapped up 2023 and then the fun stuff that happened this past weekend as we had a guest in. Let's talk about the Fear Not series and then Christmas Eve services, even the service of remembrance. What a great time. Fear Not was this theme that ran through the whole thing.
Yeah, what a great season we've been in. You know, I think about December and the 4 times in the Christmas story in which fear not is actually given the instruction. Fear not, your prayers have been heard. You have found favor with God. Mm-hmm. God has a plan, is the way that I said that ultimately, because don't be afraid to take Mary to be your wife. And then finally, I have good news. And to highlight those 4 things and just the grace that was on each one of those. Mm-hmm. Coming into our Christmas Eve services, you reflect a little bit on, not a little bit, you actually reflect a lot of, hey, did we accomplish what God would want us to do? Mm-hmm. And it might actually even be helpful for people to know that's a significant reflective question that I and we as a team often step into. So it's not based upon, hey, did we have the right performance in place and did we have the right elements? Did we actually do what God was leading us to do as a reflective, back? And I think, man, we just did.
I think we did.
So while there's some things that we think, okay, we could have done that a little bit different, and you think about things logistically, I feel like we fulfilled God's plan.
I think so.
For that as well.
And you think what launched us into the Fear Not, we did our declaration service where we sat and we just said, hey, we felt like we've heard God saying 4 things to us, right? Yep. Around his otherness, yet intimacy toward us, his desire to be among his people, the ability for him to transform us through his presence, his desire to be among his people, and in our responding. I love that these last 7 weeks have just been us saying yes to what the Lord wants to do. And I even remember, you've heard me say it a couple times, 1 year ago, I remember we were reflecting on that wonderful passage in Isaiah about the zeal of the Lord will accomplish this. Mm-hmm. It's so fun to be in a spot where you're simply saying yes to God and in his actual pursuit, right? Yeah. And I even think of this last weekend, our testimony video with Michael,
yes.
Sorry. Mm-hmm. Just talking to Matt Swords about it, so I got confused there. Where Michael's sitting there and, what I heard him saying was, I started to have a sacred discontent in me that there was more.
Yes.
And I actually had to decide if I wanted to go after it. Mm-hmm. And in the time I was deciding, I began to question God. Like, what happens in there's no such thing as a static spirituality, is it? Yep. You are dropped into a river and you're going downstream, right?
That's right.
Or you are working to paddle upstream, right? And I just heard him saying I began to slip away, and I had to be deliberate about saying, I'm going to give this 3 days to go away and meet with this God that I think is bringing about this sacred discontent. And what an amazing thing. Yeah. And I wonder how many people in our community that story's echoed in their own life coming out of that time where the Lord has been, in a sense, propositioning us, like coming to us and saying, I want to be in your midst. I want to come to your house. Yeah. And there's a testimony then that drops in, even when it dropped in. Like that was, we recorded that a while back, right? Or at least we scheduled it a while back. And the timing worked out really beautifully, I think. So,
and as a congregation grows, I am not sure that people understand just the divine element, which that sounds really strange for me to even say that. Because you would think, well, of course, God's leading and there's a divine element in everything that we do. But honestly, I think as a church gets bigger, I am not sure that people think a little bit more programming, right, more so than God's divine element. Yeah. So one of the things that, again, going back to reflecting through, did we do what God has asked us to do? And so we do our best to follow him and follow his lead, but we don't know the end when we start at the beginning. No, we know where we think that God's asking us to go. So when we think about not only the weeks that we took on sharing vision about what God's doing among us, that's right, followed by Fear Not, followed by Christ the King weekend, that's right, the last weekend of the year, And then going into this season of prayer and fasting with the very first testimony that had been scheduled being from Michael as he shared, man, I set aside his distractions and I sought the Lord, and this is what he has done.
I said yes to the invitation of God. And I just want to take a moment here and make sure that we're ministering that point to so many of us. I think for those of us like Kevin and I, we live in this stuff every day because we end up being stewards in some ways. But I want to, my heart goes to, and I run a Connect group, and so I hear it in my Connect group, like all that God's been doing over the last 8 weeks or so, they want to say yes to it, and they're figuring out how. And I think Michael's testimony is just a reminder, like it will take a certain amount of consecration to have that moment. But man, when the heart of God opens up towards you, it doesn't take a lot of work after that, right? Because something just shifts in you. And we want to make sure that wherever you're at in processing what's been the Lord's been doing, or the invitation of God over the last number of weeks is continue to keep yourself available. And that's beautiful, the beauty of the fast, isn't it? So let's just chat a little bit about the fast, then we'll talk about this last weekend. We launched the fast almost a week ago now. We launched reflecting on it. Last Friday, we launched it officially. And we do this every single year. We've done it forever, haven't we?
We have.
Forever.
I can't even remember when it started, quite honestly. So I can remember always doing it, and just I've kind of lost the initial, this is why we do that. But I know that we also, one thing to point out about the fast is, I know that we are also partnering, or the same thing with multiple congregations in our region and actually across the country. So the ARC Network is one of those that encourages 21 days of prayer and fasting.
I think Dove Westgate's
Dove does it. I'm pretty sure the Worship Center and others do that as well. So it's great to know that it's beyond us personally to a congregation, and then also
to a region,
the body of Christ.
Man, let it be, God. So that brings us to, I love being part of this region. We do know that we have a close relationship with Global Awakening, located out in the Mechanicsburg area, and we had the privilege of having someone who was a disciple of that movement with us this last weekend. Will Hart, who is the CEO of Iris Ministries. And Will came in, and hey, one of the things I love about ECC is we have a steady diet here. If you're with us long enough, you're going to get a steady diet of the Word, particularly around no God, no freedom, no purpose, make a difference. And then we occasionally throw in what I call, like, if that's the coleslaw, we throw in salsa every once in a while, right? We take a good Pennsylvania Dutch dish and we throw something exciting in, like Will Hart or Charity Kiembe or Randy Clark or something like that. So I'd love to even talk a little bit about that, the heart of the steady diet, and then these moments where we get an infusion or an impartation, what we even mean when we talk about that.
Well, part of my responsibility as a pastor is to look for what are the outside resources that we need to actually have a balanced diet, if you want to put it that way, or to have those things imparted to us. And even as I mentioned to the congregation, as I introduced Will this past weekend, that when I have someone come and speak in front of the congregation, there's an element of what they're carrying that I feel like is both being communicated to us and possibly, or even more importantly, imparted to us as well. So Charity, teaching on angels and dreams is not a regular thing that we do, but she had something that I felt like we needed in this season, even as God is releasing increasing dreams and people are confused about what do I do with these kind of things? And so, Mike Hutchings, and what he brought, he was a resource that came in and imparted something to the congregation, Randy Clark and others as well. And then there's Will Hart.
He was his own thing.
That's right.
He's great.
And what a great guy. Loves people, loves God and loves people. Those two primary things there as well. And it was fun to see almost like the, what's the word I would use to describe? Something was just loose, like a bull loose, possibly in a China shop or something like that. But then so I would told Will, like, hey, make yourself at home. Like, we're giving you X number of minutes, and so just make yourself at home to minister to people. And then in that freedom to address fear, to even specifically relate to King David, where King David just had a heart for the Lord, wasn't perfect, but had a heart for the Lord. And how that was a reference point for what you brought the week before. Don't look at it. David did not call him a giant.
Yep, exactly right.
And even as we think about the December 30, 31 weekend, what impacted people was that David is the one person who never called him a giant.
That's exactly right.
And here comes Will, fresh off 2 weeks of global awakening, 2 days of global awakening, doesn't know us real well and addresses the very same thing. Like we say, God is speaking to us in that way.
That's right, right. And so I know what 2024 may have difficulties in it, may have giants in it. What we're trying to remind ourselves is they are not giants in God's eyes, right?
Yep.
The perspective on what a giant is changed when God is so close, so the lens we're looking through and everything. And I think Will brought that. I think the other thing that Will brought that I thought was really important, and Will was unique in the sense of, you're right, that he was spontaneous. He even admitted, like, my ADHD, I don't want to be prayed for because
That's right.
it actually allows me to hunter-gather what God might be saying even in the moment. And so what it could have felt like he might have been jumping around, you could see this theme running through the two different services, slightly different theme, where one of them was about, hey, seasons do come, and there's something about the fathers in 1 John are called fathers because they see from the beginning. They're able to step back. They're able to see this thing. They see the longitudinal faithfulness of God. They live out of that, etc.
Yep.
And so they don't always get caught in, what's this season about? Or am I in the right season? It's like, no, you see this. So there was this deep ministry of, like, what even glory unto glory looks like. I mean, I know the one person in our congregation watched it online later in the day and said that he cried from the moment it started to the end, and was particularly impacted by his own life journey of feeling like the Lord's always been good to him. But that doesn't mean that life was always easy, right? And the whole idea that glory unto glory is a little bit more like this, but it is nevertheless glory because God's there with you in it, right? And so that was a deep theme of that on the 10:30 service. The 8:30 service, I do believe it was the service where the giants referenced that David walked out with a certain kind of complete trust in what he had experienced with God to be able to look at whatever was in front of him and say, that's actually defying God, and that comes down. And I know that's part of Will's heart too, is to make sure that we are a people of the kingdom that are meant to be sent out and do things. And that means we will defy things that look like the biggest thing in our world at that moment, or the biggest thing in our culture at that moment. We are able to defy that. And so I just think Will, even though he had such a unique delivery in that, was just bringing us something to be thinking about. Right?
And one of the things I look for, you can easily tell that Will has been discipled by Randy Clark, Dr. Randy Clark. And so one of the things that I appreciate when I'm bringing someone that's going to be here is I want them to love people. And so when I see Dr. Clark, he's here till 11 o'clock at midnight just ministering to people. And when I see Mike Hutchings or Charity, who just wants to be around people, and even back Jeff and Shaunti Feldhahn, when they were here, they always wanted to be, hey, if the meeting starts at 7 o'clock, I want to be at the building by 6.
Desmond and Sandy prayed too.
Yeah, Desmond and Sandy. And so that's very special to me. So as much as I look at the message and what they proclaim from the platform, how they cared for people was very important. So I think we left the building yesterday, 2:30, approaching 3 o'clock. He just ministered to people afterwards. He had to drive back to Tennessee last night.
After ministering to the youth in the evening.
And I think he left at like 10:15 to 10:30. And initially it was, I really need to leave by 8:30 to get home. And
I set those goals too. Remember, the ADHD played to our favor in that one. He set his goal for 8:30, got out of here.
By the way, I want to actually mention the ADHD, ADD thing. And he just simply said, don't pray that off me, I like it. I thought there was actually significant freedom in that. Because people that actually manage that a bit, like, what's wrong with me? And it becomes a burden to them.
They're incredibly redeemed versions.
And he just simply said, listen, it enables me to do this, 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 and this. It has its challenges, but what it enables me to do, and I'm fine with it. I thought there was grace actually on that statement for people.
So. I think it's something we got to explore, and I do think that this is, my heart, I expressed it to you last week, that I believe the Lord's going to bring a lot of healing this year, particularly around addictive cycles, right? And knowing ourselves well and what we're looking for the Lord to give us breakthrough in is part of it. And I just love that he sat there. He's like, the Lord and I are at peace on this particular area. And the Lord has used it, turned it for good. And so just was really into what he was about. Now, I do want to say there's one thing I love about Ephrata Community Church, and I was just talking to Matt Swords about it, so it's fresh, is that And you even heard me when I began with that analogy of, hey, we have our steady diet, and then we have these wonderful, not desserts, but supplements, I want to call them, right?
That's
And I
cool.
love the way you turned it like, well, actually, they're part of the balanced diet. There's one thing I love about Effort Community Church. When I think about the level of front of house communicators God's given this, like, when I hear Dan or Wes or Chris, and of course you and Matt, I sit and I go, man, what a diverse diet even there, right?
Yes.
Like if we were all given a chicken to prepare, we are all going to, there's going to be a kebab, there's going to be a rotisserie. Exactly. Someone's going to do a jerk chicken. Chris will be the jerk chicken. So all that to say, I just love that the Lord's blessed us in-house with such a diverse palate or diet.
Yeah.
And then when these, so I would just want to commend you, Matt and I were just talking about, like, you're able to spot those special supplements we need to get in to make sure that even that steady diet doesn't get insulated. Because I think of so many churches. I grew up in a church where I think the same pastor was in the pulpit 48 or 50 weeks a year.
Yeah.
And I look at what we currently have and I'm like, that is a healthy thing there. And then you throw in these supplements. So I just want to commend you for keeping that steady diet. I mean,
Thank you.
Steady diet, and then also bringing in just these right supplements. I think Will was spot on for that.
Yeah, I want to mention 2 comments about that. One is, after the prophetic word on Sunday morning, second service, I feel a little bit of pressure when it comes to communicating.
I know. Yeah, there was.
It's like, he's telling the
Will
whole
spent some significant time prophesying in the service over Kevin. It was really fun.
So the congregation's like, he's telling the congregation, like, you're going to see increased anointing and grace and insight. Like, oh my goodness, like you've told them.
That's right.
Like,
Now I got.
I'm preaching this weekend, for crying out loud. So
and I'm your service pastor. I'll try not to be hard.
So one of the things coming up as well as we enter into this, continue through this God Is series, which is lasting all the way through Easter.
Let's talk about it a bit.
So one of the things I've asked the entire team, as when you look at the attributes of God, it's a long list. So we have a lot to choose from. And they're going to be hearing from myself.
I'm in April.
Pretty much many of our team is actually communicating in it. And what I've asked them to do is, what specific attribute of God has God given you revelation in that you can then actually share and communicate and produce a message on, with the idea of you are both having information and impartation.
Right.
So as you share about a personal experience, even like Michael did in the testimonies past weekend, when you share personal experience of knowing God, with that, there's a grace for other people to grab a hold of it. So I'm looking for all that we're going to be sharing over the course of these next, up to even 12 weeks.
That's right.
Where there'll be both information and an impartation in it, which I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah, and I always want to unpack exactly what that means for you all, because Kevin carries us with such wisdom and grace. But I remember when Kevin let us know this series was coming up, we talked about the God Is. You're probably encountering that if you have a chance to be in the prayer journal. If not, check it out digitally online. But within it, he gave us a hint like, hey, we want to be speaking on these topics. So I remember my mind at that time starting to go toward one particular attribute of God and thinking, you know what, I love teaching on that particular attribute. And then Kevin came to us just about 2 weeks ago and said, hey, I believe that this is not just going to be about information, but that you're going to be speaking on something that you've experienced breakthrough in, or feel you're able to impart breakthrough, not just information. And man, as soon as he did it, my first thought was like, well, shucks, might not be able to do the same topic, because although it was transformative to me in some ways, I just knew it was going to come across more as an informational teaching. But as soon as I then slowed down, I said, Lord, is there something he gave me a whole different attribute of himself. And so I've been excited to be sitting in that other attribute
That's
now
awesome.
And saying, Lord, that one I think I not only can point to your eternal wisdom and truth around, but actually be able to impart a bit of something to the group. And as I shared with you last week when we chatted about it, but all that to say, I am looking forward to that series. Now, if you don't have the prayer journal, we can't recommend enough that you get to our website right across the top of the banner line. You'll find digital access to it. I believe we're also now sending it out daily via email. Check your email inbox. If not, please go and sign up for e-news, or shoot us a note at info@effortofcommunity.church, and we will make sure that you get that particular, start to get our e-news, and that will be within it, and you'll also get the daily email. And then, of course, there's hard copies available at the church. Kevin, anything else you want to say as we wrap up?
I am looking forward to a great 2024.
Yeah,
I just am. I can't help it. I'm just encouraged by what God is doing, and we're going to have a great experience.
Yeah.
And even I'm looking forward to this series for folks not only to share personal information from Scripture, but personal stories about how God reveals some things to them.
It's going to be good stuff,
It's
man.
going to be great.
Yep, I think
It's going to be great.
I put it this way. If we don't know the next thing to do, talk about the God who's been there for you in the past, right?
Yeah.
It's a form of thanksgiving. It's a form of, as we even talked about, taking the stone out of the center of the Jordan after you've crossed it and be able to talk about it to your children, build an altar. So I do believe there's a certain amount of each of us that are preparing for this. And even the worship teams I know have this in their mind, right? We're bringing something that we've seen victory in, and we believe it's going to be contagious. So it's going to be good stuff. Well, hey, we appreciate y'all. We hope you have a good week, and we hope to see you out this week when Kevin dives into this series. God is. Take care.
Be blessed.
Hey, thanks again for joining us today. We hope that you've been encouraged by listening. You can listen to previous episodes, find additional resources, and of course, learn more about us at EphratahCommunityChurch.com.